In the Hebrew Bible, the Urim, lights, and the Thummim, perfection or truth, are components of the Hoshen, the breastplate worn by the high priest, along with the ephod, a type of apron or garment. These items are mentioned several times in the Old Testament. For instance, in Exodus 28:30, God instructs Aaron on how to adorn his breastplate for wearing in the holy place. King Saul uses them in 1 Samuel 14:41 to determine who is at fault for breaking the army's fast. Additionally, they are referenced in Ezra 2 to confirm the lineage of those claiming to be descendants of the priests of Israel. The Urim and Thummim are sometimes associated with cleromancy, a form of divination involving casting lots. However, it's also possible that no physical casting was done, and the participants waited for a divine sign to answer their questions or reveal God's will. Modern scholars have interpreted lights and perfection as epithets for Jesus Christ, representing both light and truth. The phrase Urim and Thummim is the motto of Yale University, and the school's seal displays both the Hebrew and Latin words. The term Urim is traditionally understood to derive from a root meaning lights, reflected in the vowel points, nekudo, of the Masoretic text. Therefore, Urim and Thummim has been translated traditionally as lights and perfections, as seen in Theodotion's translation, for example, or allegorically as revelation and truth, or doctrine and truth. This translation is also found in the Vulgate by St. Jerome and in the Hexapla. Modern Catholic interpretations defend this translation by connecting Urim and Thummim to roots meaning to teach and be true. Thummim is often understood to be derived from the consonantal root meaning innocent. Many scholars now interpret Urim as deriving from the Hebrew word arim, which means curses, suggesting that Urim and Thummim essentially mean cursed or faultless, referring to the deity's judgment of an accused person. In other words, Urim and Thummim were used to answer the question of whether someone was innocent or guilty. Assyriologist William Muss Arnault connected the singular forms and Tum with Babylonian terms Urtu and Tamitu, meaning oracle and command, respectively. According to his theory, the Hebrew words use a plural form to emphasize their apparent majesty, rather than indicating the presence of multiple items. Along these lines, the Urim and Thummim are hypothesized to be derived from the tablets of destiny worn by Marduk on his breast in Babylonian religion. The passage in 1 Samuel 14:41 is considered significant for understanding the Urim and Thummim. It describes an attempt to identify a sinner by repeatedly dividing the people into two groups and determining which group contains the sinner. In the Masoretic text version of this passage, Saul and Jonathan are separated from the rest of the people, and lots are cast between them. However, the Septuagint version states that Urim would indicate Saul and Jonathan, while Thummim would indicate the people. The Septuagint also uses a phrase translated as inquired of God in a previous verse, indicating that the inquiry involved manipulating objects. Scholars view these verses and versions as evidence that cleromancy was involved, with Urim and Thummim being the names of the objects used in divination. The description of the clothing worn by the Hebrew high priest in the book of Exodus presents the Urim and Thummim as part of the sacred breastplate worn over the ephod. In passages where the ephod is mentioned, scholars infer that the Urim and Thummim were used in conjunction with it, indicating a close connection. When non-prophets seek guidance from God and the advice is not given through visions, scholars suggest that Urim and Thummim were the implied medium. In most cases, questions requiring a simple yes or no answer are posed, aligning with the pattern scholars observe. The two exceptions to this pattern, which provide more complex answers, are thought by some scholars to have originally been sequences of yes or no questions that were later corrupted by editing. The biblical text does not provide a detailed description of the form of the Urim and Thummim in the passage describing the high priest's vestments. Scholars believe that the author of this passage, attributed to the priestly source, may not have been fully aware of their physical nature. However, the text indicates that they were placed into the breastplate, suggesting they were kept in a pouch within it and chosen by touch while out of view. Scholars speculate that the Urim and Thummim were small, flat objects, possibly tablets made of wood or bone. Given the interpretations that Urim signifies guilty and Thummim signifies innocent, the Urim and Thummim likely served as a means of confirming or refuting suspected guilt. Selection of the Urim indicated guilt, while selection of the Thummim indicated innocence. According to classical rabbinical literature, in order for the Urim and Thummim to provide an answer, the individual seeking guidance would stand facing the fully dressed high priest and quietly vocalize their question, ensuring that it was not loud enough for anyone else to hear. Maimonides explains that the high priest would stand facing the Ark of the Covenant with the inquirer positioned behind him, facing the priest's back. Once the question was asked, the Holy Spirit would immediately overcome the priest, enabling him to see the letters protruding in a prophetic vision. Talmudic rabbis debated the nature of the Urim and Thummim, with most believing that these were words written on the sacred breastplate. They suggested that rituals involving the Urim and Thummim were characterized by great rays of light shining out of specific jewels on the breastplate. Each jewel represented different letters, and the sequence of lighting would spell out an answer, despite the discrepancy between the 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet and the 12 jewels on the breastplate. Alternatively, some Talmudic rabbis argued that the jewels themselves moved in a distinctive way, standing out or rearranging themselves into groups to form words. The first mention of Urim and Thummim in the Bible is found in the book of Exodus, describing the high priest's vestments. The earliest chronological reference to them, as per textual scholars, is in the book of Hosea, where the ephod is referenced, suggesting that the Urim and Thummim were integral elements in Israelite religious practices around the mid-8th century BC. Consulting the Urim and Thummim was permissible for determining territorial boundaries and was required, alongside permission from the king or a prophet, if there was a plan to expand Jerusalem or the temple. Classical rabbinical writers questioned why Urim and Thummim would be necessary in the presence of a prophet. They argued that only prominent figures such as army generals, senior court figures, and kings could consult the Urim and Thummim, and questions were limited to those benefiting the people as a whole. The sacred lots were used by Joshua to uncover the sin of Achan, and Abiathar joined David, becoming high priest when David ascended the throne of Judah. Abiathar was eventually deposed from office when he lost the Holy Spirit, without which the Urim and Thummim could not be consulted according to the Jewish Encyclopedia. While Josephus argues that the Urim and Thummim remained functional until the era of the Maccabees, Talmudic sources unanimously agree that they ceased to function much earlier, specifically after Jerusalem was sacked by the Babylonians. A passage from the book of Ezra, overlapping with Nehemiah, mentions that individuals unable to prove descent from the priesthood before the Babylonian captivity had to wait until priests possessing Urim and Thummim were found, indicating that these sacred objects had been lost by that time, as affirmed by the Talmud. The priestly source, dated by textual scholars to a couple of centuries prior to the captivity, does not describe the appearance of the Urim and Thummim, and they are not mentioned beyond David's death in the Deuteronomic history, suggesting their disuse before the Babylonian conquest due to the increasing influence of prophets. Maimonides states that the Urim and Thummim existed during the Second Temple period, but were non-functional because the priests no longer possessed the Holy Spirit. However, Rabbi Abraham ben David argues that during that era, the Urim and Thummim were entirely absent. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe.